Hello, Benedikt. Thank you for finding time to give us a presentation regarding DSA and DMA. And just a quick heads up. Benedikt Blomeyer is CEO of Allied for Startups. Allied for Startups is a umbrella organization for entities across the Europe, such as for Startup Poland. And Benedikt is located in Brussels, and he is on the daily basis involved in the Brussels, you can say, politics. And Benedikt, the DSA and DMA is step by step is here with us and is going to stay, as we know. And we asked you, well, actually a week ago to have a presentation for us, and you actually did that. So can you please walk us through the presentation regarding the DSA and DMA, and after that we can have a quick chat. So the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, and it's thrilling, really, to see that there is so much interest in discussing these files. It's absolutely true that startups will be having to implement these rules, whether directly or feeling indirectly the consequences. So it's all the more important that at least we are aware. If we are not even, and the next step would be to be active on these files as well. On the next slide, you can see, by ways of introduction, just who we are. You're absolutely right. Overwhelming majority of our members are from Europe, and that's why also we're based in Brussels. A lot of tech policy comes from here and is usually scaled up across the world from Brussels. So we're at the heart of where startup policies are usually made. And today I wanted to share just a few insights into research and findings we've been having around the DSA, especially, and its impact for startups. But I'm happy to also walk through a bit of our work on the DMA. On the next slide, you'll just see a bit of recap for those viewers who are looking at it for the first time. But the long story short, the DSA is a reform of the e-commerce directive. E-commerce directive is over 20 years old. So you can imagine, the Googles and the Fishbrains and these were not around then. So we all think it's a good idea that the rules are updated. That can be a big win for startups. It can clarify the framework they operate in. At the same time, it's really important to get some key components right, like an intermediary liability framework that we've had in the past, like making sure there's no monitoring obligation or maintaining the country of origin principle. I'm happy to walk through these in a minute, but I think it's suffice to say that there's over 10,000 platforms in Europe. They will be in the scope of this. So let's make sure that this can be the rocket fuel they need to scale up across the Union and across the world. And on the next slide, you'll see that we've actually done some research on this. Now, obviously, we think startups are the most important thing in the world. But what we did last year was we commissioned some research to find out what the effect of the DSA could be on the business users of the platforms that we represent. So we surveyed 1,000 businesses in key sectors like retail, travel and tourism, gig economy, and creative industries to see what they would do if the DSA would lead to changes with the platforms they use. So imagine bookings or ads if they placed online, or online reviews, or if they share material or content. And we did this modeling on the main parts of what we've seen from the DSA so far. And then we modeled scenarios of how the DSA could look like and what the fallout could be on the business world. And on the next slide, you'll see a bit about the methodology. Now, I don't want to overwhelm you, but long story short is we've run through these models. And you can see what it means if we need to, for instance, require additional details in the first strand for platforms which are selling goods or services. Then there would be pros and cons. Of course, there could be increased trust, but of course, if there's a more complicated verification procedure, there could be a harder onboarding or more costs with regular maintenance of a platform. So there's a lot of iterations, and we'll be happy to share the report and the exhaustive methodology report afterwards. But I think what it really boils down to is the 3 scenarios we came up with, and that's the key message, and that's on the next slide. So there's 3 scenarios we came up with. One is increased liability. Basically means stringent new rules mean platforms at the end of the day are legally more responsible for content posted, for goods sold on their sites by others, by third parties, by users, by businesses. This, of course, means they have to implement seriously, complicated and comprehensive new measures, and of course also deal with ways to mitigate liability. Now you can see, I'm afraid the subtitles in the graph are a bit jumbled, but this has the biggest revenue impact on business users as well. Now that number of up to 3% GDP decrease represents roughly 23 billion euros in revenues and GDP impact for on EU industries. So by far the most severe and hard-hitting of the 3 scenarios. Now the other 2 scenarios, clear procedural obligations for platforms, still means there will be extra homework and extra legwork to do for startups. And automatic filtering, which is perhaps not the best way of saying it, but that category essentially means we give platforms the tools to automatize some of these tasks. So for instance, adding in an automatic KYBC, know your business customer requirement, which is a lot easier than making them liable at the end of the day. These are the 2 other scenarios, and they both actually lead to increases in revenue for business users of platforms, as you can see here. Now, this is not cheap. For startups, there's still a cost involved. So there will still, for startups, there's still a cost in I think it was above €1 billion that was calculated, but it's significantly less costly than liability. And it's something where there's positive benefits for the business users at the end of the day. Now, this research is over a year old, but it's super relevant now because actually in the parliament, some of the discussions that are happening are actually returning to these models. So when we are talking in the parliament, for instance, about making marketplaces liable, well, we've modeled for this, and we've seen that if we end up making marketplaces liable, this is going to be very costly for the platforms and for the business users. And we would therefore suggest the other 2 paths. Similarly, for advertising, transparency is something that we've seen, we can do more on. But at the end of the day, if we move from clear procedural obligations, adding those to a wholesale ban, this is going to be significantly harder for also small businesses at the end of the day. So I think I will leave it with a high-level note and say the DSA has a lot of potential to improve the landscape and make it clearer and harmonized for startups. But right now in the parliament, we're seeing the reports taking a sharp turn to becoming a lot more heavy-hitting, especially for small businesses and startups. And that's why it's all the more important to inform yourself, ask questions, share the example of your startup, and be engaged in the discussion. And secondly, on the DMA, I'll just add one sentence and say that here too, there's a lot going on for a file which has a far more limited scope. But I think we shouldn't underestimate how interconnected our ecosystems are. This graph here also is based on the kind of assumptions that our ecosystems are very interdependent. Many startups use cloud services. Very many startups or small businesses are found on maps. And because information is found on maps, maybe coming initially from a search, there are follow-through effects also in the DMA for startups. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have in this call or afterwards. But I'm happy to stop here and listen to your feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Benedikt. So, I think there are a few things. The first thing is that that the timing of our of our call or of our talk is very crucial, because I think it was 2 weeks ago there was the big Facebook tango down. Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. So I think I think that's kind of one thing that we can think about. The other thing is that we have blue shirts, which is actually which is actually pretty funny. But anyway, I have two things regarding the DSA and DMA and startups. Is that I think to the very end, people will not care about it, right? That's what I think. And at the end, they will ask, hey, why didn't anybody had more roundtables? Why didn't we sign anything, or didn't we email anybody? And why? And the big why. So I think one thing is actually getting people to know what is going to happen and what is going to change and when. And the other thing, and the other question will be regarding the other aspects. So I think can you elaborate how to to raise awareness?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Also with the example you mentioned at the top, right now this afternoon there was a slew of reports about Facebook coming in, and they kind of at very least show us why there is so much attention on these files, and many might say this is also why we need to do more. We also at Allied for Startups think that we need to do more to have a clear rule set to work with going forward. From the get-go, we've also been saying we need to make sure we're making rules that are proportionate to the size and to the risk exposure of a given startup and platform. So it's very important that when somewhere in Krakow some young entrepreneurs are building the next big thing, the rules also reflect that these guys' platform doesn't have the same risk exposure as maybe a very big social media company does already. And therefore, they are also not treated with the same kind of heavy-hitting provisions all the time. I think this is not an unreasonable ask to be making. I think it's one which has the European SME and startup success story written all over it. But it's an ask that it's not being heard enough these days. And that's where Startup Poland, Allied for Startups as an umbrella, our communities come in, because we need to collect and amplify these voices more. You're absolutely right. If you know this better than I do on the ground, if you ask an entrepreneur about their priorities, I don't think policy will be mentioned in the top 10 or top 20. And the DSA will be there in a couple of years. And for a startup, if 9 out of 10 fail in the first 5 years, they really think they have bigger fish to fry, and I can totally see that. It's usually only when it's mission critical that a policy becomes relevant. I think our communities have a job to look at this from a horizontal view and do our best to explain and translate these developments. I think that's an ongoing conversation. It isn't easy, and it's one where I think one of the best things we can do is be sharing more examples. These entrepreneurs that we represent, they have the keys to our digital and green transition, and policymakers want to get it right for them. At least that's what they tell us. So, if that's the case, then we should be able to, with our recommendations, also kind of punch through to them, if I can say it like that. And if you ask me what's next, we still have a couple of months to give feedback to the Parliament report before it's kind of closed off and the interinstitutional dialogue begins. So now is the
So let me take a step back. So why did DSA or DMA was introduced? What was who and when introduced it, and the second question is where we are at the legislative stage, and as you said so we know.
Yeah, and I'm catching myself talking as long as policymakers already, so please interrupt me if I go on too long. But to make a long story short, the DSA and DMA are different files, and they reflect different objectives. The DSA is essentially the reform of the e-commerce directive, which deals with illegal goods and illegal content online. And there's numerous provisions in there to address numerous issues, ranging from not harmful, but goods which are not good, misinformation, election integrity. So there's a lot of kind of problems related to illegal content that this is trying to address. And the digital market
and the commission started to work on the DSA when do you think it started?
I believe it was presented in 2019 as one of the flagship proposals for this current commission, but they've been collecting feedback and been thinking about this for longer.
Yeah. So it's a big thing for the EU community in order to pass the DSA, right?
Yes, this is a massive deal, and it's going to have repercussions across Europe, across the digital single market, hopefully for the better. And I'm pretty sure other regions, we know, for instance, the United States is also looking at updating its rules for the digital economy. We'll be taking a very close look at the way this was done here. So it's all the more motivation to get it right. And on the DMA, it's a bit different because the express goal of the DMA is to ensure fair and contestable markets. So the scope is very limited to what it identifies as gatekeepers. But nonetheless, it is relevant to us. And the easiest explanation I have is startups are customers, complementary goods or complementary products, and competitors of big tech, of gatekeeper platforms. So it's some may say a DMA is really important to kind of make sure we have space to innovate. Some may be a bit more hesitant to say, look, it's all good and well, but I work very closely with them. What I think we can't deny is that it's important for us, and that's why it's really important for us to also look at it and engage on the DMA as well.
Okay, so and where we are at the legislative, stage, where as you said, there will be a few months, but if you can,
Let me break it down. Basically, the Commission presented both files December last year, and when the European Commission presents the files, then the two other legislative bodies, the EU Council, representing the governments of the countries, and the European Parliament, representing directly elected MEPs, have to make their positions. This is happening right now. The Parliament has had consulting committees give opinions. Now the lead committee, which is the Internal Market Committee, is finalizing its report. I think it's due in 8 November, but we've heard it's basically an open secret that there's a delay coming because it is very controversial. And for the DMA, it's similar, although the DMA is probably a bit further down the line already. So basically, the committees and the Parliament are making their final report, and this they will take into what is known as the trilogue, when all three legislative bodies come together and make one final version.
Okay, and so, for example, if as you probably know, Poland is a place where a lot of marketplaces tend to grow and tend to be even unicorns. So a lot of those, provisions will be actually that they will struggle with the new provisions. So what should they do? What should they, write to their, write to the Polish Prime Minister, write to the, commissioner, which commissioner, or to the MPs? What should they, what should they do? Who should they, who should they support? Except of us, but what, you know.
Yeah, I think first thing I would say, which I think every entrepreneur supports, is don't make it too hard for yourself. Look where you can kind of join forces which are already there. So Startup Poland, Allied for Startups, and other kind of advocacy organization or community organizations are most likely looking at this already, and they'd be super curious to hear your case. So the first thing would be join forces with your local community and with with international movements. And all three of the recommendations you made, speaking to your government, speaking to policymakers in the EU, and speaking to your directly elected members of the European Parliament, have value. And since all three organs are either now or in the near future going to be working and negotiating on the file. And it would be super important if Poland, specifically as a kind of a leading digital frontrunner and also one of the major countries in the EU, has an ear for or is close to startups on this. I cannot underline how important the Polish voice will be on this file.
So is there going to be any dialogue with like a third sector, if we can say that, we can organize a meeting with with a commissioner or with someone, and we can present our our doubts or or what we would like to change in the DSA or DMA. Would be there any chance to organize something like that? Just a question.
Yeah, it's happening all the time, and yes, I think it's interesting for us to think about kind of how exactly and who the best person would be to talk to right now, and we can also take that offline. But yes, and a lot of other constituencies are doing it. You can rest assured that some of the big players, some of the old incumbent industries, maybe that startups are disrupting, are doing this, and they're probably doing this a lot more than we are. So it's all the more important to take these initiatives right now. From experience, if you go to talk to Polish MEPs or startups from Poland, rally together and share their key thoughts with government or others, usually there's an open ear, and it's a great start to kick off a conversation. I think it's not just about making sure the DSA and DMA work out for startups, or are a success story for startups even better, but also to make sure that on the next files that are coming, there's a consultation which really takes you and your views on board more. Just one last sentence. The Commission will present in December the Data Act. The Data Act is known around here as the GDPR for non-personal data. Now, I would bet that most of your members probably haven't heard about it, but you know what? It's going to be a really big deal for your members. And we've been saying all along, and still think this is one of those classic cases where, if we don't make this for startups, we're doing something wrong. And that's why, startups need to be involved by definition in the process.
Yeah, I wanted to make the comparison to the GDPR, but thank you for doing that. But do you think it is really going to to change the shape of how we use the internet actually, or the platforms, or the or the online stores, marketplaces? Do you think really it's gonna change it, or it's going to be the other way around? I know it's being a devil's advocate, but it's it's a free conversation. So I thought, so I think to myself, why not to ask such a question? or if it's going to be or if it's going to be actually worse than GDPR.
I think the ruling is out. It depends really much on which direction it goes. I think you mentioned now that GDPR is out there. We all know that EU rules do have an impact on our businesses, quite profound. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And at the end of the day, the GDPR is now a harmonized EU framework. It's there, and we're dealing with it. And I think I'm not kind of sharing any secrets when I'm saying that it could have been smoother and easier. And there's also things in the GDPR which probably could be improved. The DSA and DMA will also have a profound impact on the way startup ecosystems operate. Now is the time to see, to make sure it's a net win, not a net lose. And if I just take one example in there, the country of origin principle, that's pretty fundamental for how the digital single market works. Basically means that a startup coming out of Poland has to basically, stick to the rules of the member state it's coming from, its country of origin, Poland, and can scale up across the union. And does not have to scale up 27 times if it's available online in the union. So if we undercut that and move towards a country of destination principle, especially on the enforcement, that's going to make it a lot harder for the smalls to compete with and challenge the very big.
Yeah, of course. And even cooperation with the big entities will be actually, will be harder, because they actually tend to, if they're taking you for as some kind of vendor or something, they just want to be compliant with all the rules. So that I think you're right. So we went through the call to action, which is very, very important for us. So if anybody has anything that she needs to write to their MP or to the government or to you or me, and we should be united and speak one voice. Of course, there are going to be a lot of groups of interest, because the people have different interests. It's normal, right? As I think, but regarding the principles, we need to start collaborating and talking to each other.
Yeah, I can only underline that. There's a great letter that we've shared today, also publicly. I believe Startup Poland also co-signed it, which outlined some of the high-level principles we think we need to get right if we want to make the DSA a success for startups. And I'm happy to also share it, and we can add it to the links for the viewers.
Yeah. We will do that somewhere, somewhere over. Yeah, but yeah, we will do that. Anyway, Benedikt, as a 40-minute rule, would you like to add something, or anything, how to what's next in Allied for Startups? What should we expect at the end of the year or the beginning of next year? What will you do, or what will Allied for Startups do?
I wish I could say something super exciting, but for sure we will keep working on the policy stuff. That's something we are committed to, but we are going to go and speak more about this also at Web Summit / and other big conferences, and bringing dedicated policy tracks to these big startup events, because we need to get it out there more and discuss it more. So if you're at any one of these events, reach out to us and we can have a chat there, and you can learn more about policy that impacts your startup there as well.
Thank you, Benedikt, for taking the time. We will, of course, upload it to our website. You can also upload it to the website of Allied for Startups. And thank you one more time for having having time for us and for the presentation. And I hope that this is not the end. We'll have a catch up within a month, to see where's the bill at, and maybe we can have some one other person, so we can have a discussion, and you can update us, what is going on. So thank you one more time, Benedikt, and see you and hear you soon.
Thanks.